I have the pleasure to present to you Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
Happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. "50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. This nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today that one day every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, my country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous slopes of California. Not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring. And when this happens, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Good morning. My name is Reverend Willie Bodger II, and I serve as senior pastor of the historic 12th Baptist Church, as well as a board member of the Roxbury YMCA. Let us prepare for our invocation. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat, have not our weary feet, and come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We come to you on today, O Lord, to celebrate a man whose life was an embodiment of love, of peace, and righteousness. We come on this day gathered virtually as we are still facing this pandemic that has caused so much grief. And yet we also come knowing that we have come this far by faith, and that together we shall overcome. God, we come to seek your face as we continue in the spirit of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who taught us that by standing up for righteousness, we can fight against injustice. So we come on this day to honor that great man and his legacy, a man who led in his moment, which gave way to a movement. A man who turned a mirror to America to show its unfavorable reflections. A man who chose his vision of a beloved community over violence. And so we have come on this day in the spirit of that resistance and in the spirit of overcoming, because we know darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. So God, let our light shine. Let it shine by advocating for the passage of the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. Let our light shine by ensuring opportunities for our youth and our elders and our families in the neighborhood of Roxbury. Let our light shine by working towards health equity and safety in our community. Let our light shine by supporting the Roxbury YMCA. And so as I close, we pray for continued blessings over the leadership and daily work of the Roxbury Y, and we ask that you bless our time together as we let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies, and let it resound loud as the rolling sea. I give you this prayer in the name of my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And let every heart and mind say together, amen.
Again, good morning. I'm Wilton Devon Baker, Chair of the Board for the Roxbury YMCA. I'd like to thank you, the audience, for participating in this day of MLK's birthday celebration, breakfast, and also to just celebrate the power of legacy. I'd like to thank our board members for their efforts in this year. I also like to thank our corporate sponsors for always being there to support us, support all of our programs, and everything we do to enhance our community through the Roxbury YMCA. Finally, I'd just like to thank everyone, all of the stakeholders, all of the employees, everyone who's made this year a fantastic year. And finally, again, we thank you for your generous donations and supporting us throughout this year. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, it's Mayor Michelle Wu. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day is a time to reflect on the impact of the civil rights movement and its many leaders. We're able to work towards a better future for everyone today by building on their work and their legacies. Boston is uniquely connected to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy. This is the city where Dr. King studied theology, where he preached at the historic 12th Baptist Church, and where he led a historic march to City Hall to protest systemic racism. Dr. King is among many civil rights activists that Boston has fostered. Here, we are home to journalist, activist, and suffragist Josephine St. Pierre, to the First Lady of Roxbury, Ms. Melnia Cass, to State Representative Mel King, to journalist and advocate and trailblazer Sarah Ann Shaw, and to so many Black activists whose legacies we build on today. These historic figures and today's activists understand that a city for everyone must be rooted in social and racial justice. I want to thank the Roxbury YMCA for facilitating the urgent intergenerational conversations that are necessary for us to build our brightest future in Boston.
Good morning. My name is James Morton, and I'm the President and CEO of the YMCA of Greater Boston. And it is my pleasure to be with you this morning on the 14th annual celebration of the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King's legacy was one of service, and the Roxbury YMCA is just that, a place where service happens. It's a place where families get the food they need, where children get the support they need, where when children were looking for remote educational opportunities, they could find those right here in the gym of the Roxbury YMCA, where they got their lessons, they got enrichment, they got movement, and they got the opportunity to interact with other children, and they got food. Last summer, we were the place where children could get academic enrichment so they could catch up on the skills that they might have lost in the previous year and a half or so. And we are the place where everyone, no matter your age or your stage in life, could get everything you needed around wellness and exercise. You know, Dr. King's legacy was to make sure that everyone had access to equal health opportunities, equal educational opportunities, and equal wellness opportunities. And the Roxbury YMCA has provided all of those things right here in this branch. And so we think that the Roxbury YMCA branch lives out the legacy of Dr. King each and every day and each and every second of every minute. And so thank you for supporting this branch and allowing it to do the great work that Dr. King called upon us to do. Thank you very much.
My name is Nia Grace. I am a very proud Roxbury resident as well as business owner. I own the Darrow's Corner Bar and Kitchen, which is a Southern food and live music institution here in the city, as well as the Underground Cafe and Lounge. So, being a Roxbury resident, as well as a board member for the Roxbury YMCA, we are privy to seeing things up close and personal about what's going on in our community. Food insecurity has been something that plagued our community for years. It's as simple as, some people depending on meals when they go to school as being a part of what their plan is for daily life. And having had things like that taken away from them in 2020 was very impactful. It was one of the things that, in fact, I'm very proud that the YMCA saw that as an issue early on, that was going to be a problem. Organizations like the YMCA and the Roxbury YMCA particularly are supposed to answer the call. Some people or some organizations sometimes can shy away from it for feeling that the feat is too great. And what I can recognize is that the Roxbury YMCA did not do such. They understood the challenge. They understood that it was a really great toll. And in that understanding, they still delivered on feeding or distributing more than 12 million meals since 2020. And so for whether it was a snack or a lunch or a dinner or Thanksgiving and Christmas meals, they didn't stop at one kind of pocket of. They understood too, even before that, summer meals is something that is typically lacking for the exact same reason. When school's out of session, that one or two meals that parents depend on is also out of session. And so they kind of doubled down in that effort, and not only feeding youth, but full families and seniors and anyone, in fact, who was an affiliate of, and that could just be the neighborhood or the organization itself, an affiliate of. We recognize your need. That means we're here to serve you. And so, again, over 12 million meals distributed is something that is remarkable, but at the same time, it's expected. The Y has been answering calls for years. The YMCA's reach extends beyond its membership base. Truthfully, for every YMCA that is submerged within the community, they make it their business to know, to understand, and to show that everyone within that community, even on the outskirts of it, are a part of the YMCA family. So you don't, again, have to be a member to reap any of these, and less of a benefit, but more of our extension of hospitality. You know, I am in the hospitality industry, and for me, you don't have to be a regular customer. You can just be a visitor, and I'm going to treat you like family. And that's what the Roxbury YMCA does. So one of the first things I want to do is, thank the donors who have religiously committed to the YMCA and its initiatives. Those who are new and have even given one time, I thank you as well. And for the people who are listening today, I encourage you to activate your sense of charity and make a donation. Small, large, whatever the capacity is that you have, every little bit helps. We think about the 12 million fed, or at least the 12 million meals distributed, and we know that couldn't have been done on the back of the Roxbury YMCA alone. It literally took the entire village to make sure that happens. And so I invite you to be a part of that village and make a contribution today.
Good morning, everyone. Although I'm disappointed that we cannot be together in person to honor the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., our beloved community, and the work ahead, I am appreciative of the invitation extended to me by my longtime sister friend, Executive Director Catherine Saunders, and Chair of the Board, Wilton Devon Baker, for the invitation to join you. I'm thrilled to be here with you this morning for this annual celebration as we discuss the power of legacy, a perfect theme for the moment in time that we find ourselves in as a nation, as our country continues to endure record attacks on our democracy and the sacred right to vote. It's more important now than ever before that we recognize that we are still in the midst of the civil rights movement. It never ended. I know that history often will try to convince you that Rosa sat and that John Lewis crossed a bridge and Martin Luther King Jr. marched, and suddenly we had our civil rights and voting rights realized, and Black folks had full liberation and emancipation. Of course, that is not true. Once we've earned these rights and put in that work, that doesn't mean that we will have them in perpetuity. We have to continue to fight and do the work of preserving those rights once we have earned them. And so we are still very much in the civil rights movement. It did not end. Every single one of you has a role to play in the movement. And so in this moment today, we enlist you in the work of the civil rights movement, this ongoing movement at a time of unprecedented challenge and unprecedented attacks against our democracy and our voting rights in our country today. I have a fundamental belief with movements, and that is that there is neither an eligibility age or a shelf life, which I think really fits the theme for today. We need young and old. And that is how we have the most effective movements that are inclusive and representative of every walk of life. And so, because I believe in the power of young people, I introduced an amendment to lower the voting age in federal elections to 16. Consistent with what we've seen throughout history, it is 16-year-olds that are on the front lines of some of our hardest fights right now. And it's young people who have always ushered in transformative social movements. And we need your lived experiences, we need your energy, we need your perspective in addressing many of the greatest challenges of today. In the same way that we need our elders. We need our elders' hard-earned wisdom and resilience and institutional knowledge that can really only be passed on when we do it with the intention that the Roxbury Y is doing today. And so I thank you for that, because we need that to be passed on. And we need this wisdom now more than ever before. This is the wisdom that's necessary to ensure that we do not grow complacent, that wisdom, that historical contextualizing reminds us where we have come from, what we have overcome. And that fortifies us for the fights and the work. And that we remember that the fight for voting rights and to protect our democracy is far from finished. I believe in the power of young and old. Together, I believe in our collective strength and power. And we must not wane in our efforts. We must continue to be vigilant. The struggle continues, so too must the work, so too must our movement. I thank you for the opportunity to join you. I find such strength and inspiration in this multi-generational, multi-racial, intersectional movement that we have built together. And I remain dedicated to being your sister in solidarity and your congresswoman in this work until the beloved community is fully realized. So happy Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and I will see you soon.
In the small town where we live, there was always the colored and white signs. And we were taught, my parents always told us, you know, which one to drink out and which one not to, and what to do and what to say, and what to say to certain people.
It was just so much violence and so much wrong. It was just so much separatism, so much inequality. Injustice.
And we had segregated schools, so I grew under the black schools and white schools. You could play with white kids when you were younger, but as you got older, everybody went separate ways.
If you're an African American woman, I don't even think that's a question. That's how you survive. You have got to be involved and organized to save your life.
I got a phone call, and I picked up the phone. And they were threatening, and my dad got the phone, and he said, "You kill one of mine, I'm gonna kill two of yours." So the next thing I know, he's losing his job.
And then they killed my classmate, and I'll just say his last name, Norfleet. They dissected him, put him on the railroad track, and he was murdered. No news, excuse me. And even with him being murdered, I was even more determined to make it my business to be involved in the civil rights movement through voter registration. That was a powerful medium.
Not only making up signs and carrying signs to demonstration, I also was trying to get people registered to vote.
We marched with King down Columbus Avenue. King marched with us many times. He was no stranger to here. This was like a memory place for him because he and his wife have contacts here. Martin Luther King spent much of his life trying to get the vote. That's what he did. That's what King did. He knew the power of the vote.
The world came together and saw the ugliness of racism, inequality, injustice of the South. The world saw it, and it was Dr. King who allowed the world to see it.
If you believe that something is not right and people have the birthright to be treated fairly, then you should continue to fight for that idea. And regardless of what the ramifications are, the consequences are, you still need to move forward with that.
If you have a vote, if you vote, you have a voice, you have a say in the process. Education, employment, housing.
The vote means voice. It's your spoken voice, it's your will, it's your ideas, it's your life. If you can't have a voice, what do you have?
But if you don't vote, you have no voice. You have no power. There's power in the vote.
Things haven't changed as much as people want to believe. So you have to keep believing that things can change, but you don't stop believing that you can make a difference. So any of the odds, small, whether it's big or small, you have to keep moving forward and keep pushing that idea that things can change, even though it's a little struggle, but you don't change. And you just have to keep believing that and keep fighting for that.
I have joined a debate team where me and my classmates debated around like the social justice movement for like criminals of people of color, and we won that debate league first place.
We had a school walkout one time. There was a social, injustice act, I should say, that went on with the students. So like our friend group and everything, we got together and we organized a school walkout, and it was mostly not really like a school walkout, but we wanted to make it more so like a march and everything. So it had to be people like students within the school speak out on their experiences with injustice or anything, racial injustice or anything that they experienced within the school that made them feel any less than what they were.
The biggest part of his legacy for me is that he was able to accomplish so much and without violence. Even with violence, I believe that violence would be an acceptable response to what happened, especially considering how back then how slaves were treated and how black people were treated under the Jim Crow laws. Violence would have been acceptable, but there was no violence involved. He was able to make such a big impact on rights and like social justice with just using his words.
So I think the biggest part of MLK legacy is his inspiration to black people and people of color generally. MLK said, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." And definitely one of the most things that matter is your life, so you can't be silent about your life.
The biggest part of Martin Luther King's legacy would be to believe in your dream and to stand for what you believe in, no matter who's around, no matter what circumstances you have to face. If I could ask them any question from the civil rights movement, looking back from then till now, I would ask if they're surprised on how much teenagers vote nowadays compared to what you would think the outcome would be after like seeing how much improvement we had since then in our rights in voting and everything.
I would ask someone who lived through the civil rights era, and like how did they take actions during that time?
I would like to ask somebody that grew up during that era what they did to make a difference.
Definitely things were worse back in the civil rights era, but today things are better, and moving forward it will be better and better. Thanks to people like Martin Luther King Jr. and other influencers.
I want us to build on to what Martin Luther King started and without the violence, because I see a lot of black people wanting to retaliate, like not forgive white people at all, and I don't think that's the solution. Non-violence is key in forgiving.
I hope my generation's legacy would be to use our outlets such as social media to get our point across, our beliefs, what we stand for, our dreams in general, get our point across and stand for what we believe in using the resources that we do have.
I hope my generation understands how important it is to vote when we do come of age. And when I'm 18, I'm gonna vote.
I grew up swimming in the summer. It's one of the recreations where everybody can participate and swim. If you're blind, you're deaf, you got one leg, you got one arm, you're crazy, you can get in the pool. I lived at the other end of this pool at 14 Harold Street. It's now Martin Luther King Boulevard. And people say, "Oh, you live in Roxbury." I said, "Thank God." I got Franklin Park, I got the Roxbury Y. This Y was, it was a model for a lot of the other Ys that were built later. This was designed for the needs of a Y. A lot of Ys are in other people's old buildings. This Y is designed as a Y for Y needs. It's a place where people can wind down. It's a place that's safe for children. It's a place that has wonderful staff. You don't hear people complaining about Y staff. Roxbury Y loves the kids. They're the reason they're here. And that's the reason people join this Y, because it's a family Y. It's not just for grown-ups. The Y is an adjunct institution to public ones because it has the freedom of a nonprofit. And that word freedom is important because you can say and do things which to do in a public school means you might not get voted in again or appointed. The Y has always been welcoming and open, and as well as attractive for a place where the community can get together and discuss what our needs are and then implement them in a safe environment where you can say what you want without somebody, coming down on you in the newspaper or something like that. All communities need nonprofit organizations which are independent of government control, and the Y is one of them. The reason you should donate to the Roxbury YMCA and otherwise which are like it, not as pretty of course, is because they are an anchor institution that holds the fabric of this community together. All for one and one for all.
12th Baptist Church is considered a historic church. It's a historic church because our roots go all the way back to 1805, the first African meeting house. During that time, Thomas Paul and many others came together to build a congregation. They started in Faneuil Hall where they were meeting because they were dealing with difficulties in white congregations to get equal acceptance amongst the congregational body. And so they wanted to begin a congregation for blacks in Boston. In Faneuil Hall, they began that work. Eventually, they started what became known as the first African meeting house. And that was in 1805, August of 1805. And so the church continued with that spirit throughout this time, and they built all the way up. It is upon the installation of Leonard Grimes where we see 12th Baptist Church take form. We are the 12th Baptist Church because we are the 12th church that is registered as a Baptist church in the city of Boston. We were a safe haven and a place of harbor and safety for those who had escaped slavery and had come. This was one of the locations that people would look to on that Underground Railroad. This is one of the places that was seen as a beacon of hope because they knew that they would find safety here. You go on, you have the Reverend William Hunter Hester, who was also a great preacher, an advocate for Christian education. And there was under Reverend Hester where we find the connection to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Reverend Hester had a great relationship with Reverend Martin King Sr., who was affectionately known as Daddy King. And when Martin Luther King Jr. came to do his PhD work in the early 50s, he wanted his son to connect with Reverend William Hunter Hester and his wife. And during his time here, he preached, he ministered, he worked, he grew under the leadership of Reverend Hester. He also was able to be connected to his wife. Our church administrator at the time, Sister Mary Powell, was part-time and also in the conservatory at school with her classmate, Coretta Scott. And she invited Coretta Scott to come hear a young Martin King come and preach at 12th Baptist Church. And that was the first time he preached at 12th Baptist Church, and the first time she saw Martin King, who would eventually become her beloved husband and whom they would build a legacy of fighting for civil rights in this nation. Dr. King had really close ties with the next pastor of the church, which was the Reverend Michael E. Haynes, who, God rest his soul, recently left us. But it was through him that Dr. King came back to Boston and to speak at the legislature because he was a state representative at the time. Reverend Haynes, who's pastored for over 40 years here at 12th Baptist Church, was a huge part of building and expanding the work that was done here in the Roxbury community, particularly under the footprint of 12th Baptist Church. The beauty of this history is that it comes to fruition. As I've taken on this mantle, I find great pride and joy in this narrative that brings us all the way from 1805 till today. And I am humbled to serve as the 14th senior pastor of the historic 12th Baptist Church. And I too find resonance in the story of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, one who comes from the same city in which I was born, one who also was a preacher kid as I was, one who found himself studying his religious education here in Boston, and one who also found himself working at 12th Baptist Church. Though he went on, I am glad to stay here today and to continue that legacy of Dr. King and all of those from whose shoulders we stand upon. And I'm so grateful that the future looks even greater. And that is the work we're doing here at 12th Baptist. We've been able to do great work, and not by our might, but by the God who has brought us this far by faith. And so I am so proud to lead the historic 12th Baptist Church. I'm proud of the legacy upon which we stand, and we hope that we can continue in the spirit of Dr. King and truly say, we shall overcome.
I'm Catherine Saunders, the Executive Director of the Roxbury YMCA. Thank you, Mayor Michelle Wu and Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. And thank you, YMCA of Greater Boston CEO and President James Morton, for your inspiring leadership through these very difficult times. And thank you all for joining us as we celebrate Dr. King and the power of legacy. The powerful legacy of our ancestors, the legacies passed down in our families from generation to generation, and the collective legacy of our beloved community of Roxbury. The legacy of our elders who shared with us today, their short stories and collective wisdom. Thank you, Dr. Jean McGuire, Maddie Deed, and Carol Weidman. And finally, here's to the legacy that we pass down to our children, the privilege and legacy of their right to vote, the hard-earned fight of Dr. King and countless others. Thank you to our sponsors and all of you. Have a wonderful Dr. Martin Luther King Day.